will be made available and then will be emailed to you and shared on our center's media next week. So Liesbet. So Liesbet has got an MSc in Bio-engineering in land and forest management from the University in Ghent in Belgium. She's the director of Tracimat. I think she will be covering it in more details about what is it. She has got immense experience in various countries, USA, across Europe as a consultant in soil and groundwater remediation and various aspects. And since 2005, she's been an advisor to the Flemish Construction Confederation in Belgium on technical environmental issues. And she was also responsible for the quality management of Grondbank, which is an excavated soil management organization. And a lot of work was done on traceability system that Tracimat has developed. And she was also the operational director, which is an organization which was funded to valorize the know-how on the work that she has done on Grondbank, which assess the environmental risks and costs for construction project. So she's been working in Tracimat for since April 20, which started in 2014. So for the last 15 years, basically, she has got a huge experience in construction and demolition waste management. And we're very delighted to have Tracimat, and we know that she's very busy, and then we are very grateful for your time, Liesbet, to deliver this webinar for us. So it's all yours now. If you would like to start, please, Liesbet. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mohammed. I'm very happy to present Tracimat to all of you, to have the possibility to do this here. Because we are the first demolition waste management organization in Europe, so it might be interesting for you, I hope, to hear what we are doing. So Tracimat, let's see, yeah. We are a non-profit organization. We are recognized by the Flemish Minister of Environment. And we are operational since the summer of 2018. We were founded in 2014, but we have been working on a lot of procedures, and so we became operational in 2018. Our founders are MBuild, that is the construction federation, the Belgian Construction Federation, then ORI, which is the Federation of Engineers, and VSOR, that's actually the Flemish Federation of Demolition and Dismantling Contractors and Recycling Facilities. Tracimat is a private initiative, but in the meanwhile, our system has been included in the environmental legislation. We're a non-subsidized non-profit organization, but we work with affiliated members, and they pay an annual contribution to our organization, and also a project contribution. We have 260 demolition contractors that are affiliated with us. Tracimat is a Flemish organization, so it just covers our working area is in Flanders. We have 123 producers of recycled aggregates affiliated. We have demolition experts who make pre-demolition plans for buildings. We have 180 of them that are affiliated, and 45 make demolition plans for infrastructure works. So to give you some context, as you all probably know, the construction sector is the largest producer of waste. And in Flanders, this means that more than 60% of all waste produced comes from construction. Half of that, about 33% is excavated soil. And in Flanders, we have a legislation on the reuse of excavated soils since 2004, actually. We have specific reuse standards, so that's end of waste criteria for soil in function of the quality of the soil. So we reuse most of our excavated soils, and they are examined before reuse. And then and the other 30% is construction and demolition waste. That's about 60 million tons a year in Flanders. That's mainly a stony fraction, and since the early 90s, we've been recycling the stony fraction, and we've been producing recycled aggregates. So more than 95% of the stony fraction is being recycled, and that's actually since the beginning of the 90s. Why are we doing that already that long? That's because Flanders and Brussels, we are a very densely populated area. We don't have a lot of landfills. Nobody wants new landfills in their backyard. So we have very high landfill taxes, and we also have a lack of primary granulate, primary raw material. So we are really pushed towards recycling because of our local factors. So quantifically, we were doing well. Like, we've been recycling the stony fractions since early 90s, almost all of them. But what about the quality? Well, we have end of waste criteria for the recycled aggregates. We have specific rules for crushers, specific regulation, certification regulations since 2005. But we still had problems with the quality, so and mainly with asbestos. So the Public Waste Agency said you really still have a problem with asbestos and the quality of the recycled aggregates. You have to do something. But the crusher said, yeah, well, if the material comes in polluted, then it's impossible to get it out. And so it needs to be clean when it comes into our installation. So we need selective demolition, and we need an action at the source. Whereas the demolition contractors, they were also frustrated because those who wanted to do the demolition in a proper way and selectively, they lost all their orders to those contractors who didn't mind that much about the correct removal of hazardous waste. So they wanted more control, more public enforcement, but in Flanders, we don't have enough officers to do the public enforcement. So therefore, the sector itself, the demolition contractors and the producers of recycled aggregates, together with the Flemish Construction Federation, took the initiative to work out a system that could give more guarantees about the quality of the recycled material. And this was also supported by our Public Waste Agency. And that's actually how Tracimat, why Tracimat was founded. Now, why is a quality management so important? Because if we cannot give any guarantees about the quality of the recycled material, we will never be able to sell it. So we need a confidence of the user. If nobody wants our recycled material, then recycling is an ending story. So we need to create a market for it, but therefore we need to establish confidence in the recycled material, and we need to be able to deliver good material. What do we need for that? Well, we need end of waste criteria, which we have for recycled aggregates, but we can also work with acceptance criteria for other material other than stony fraction. We need a traceability, we need recycling facilities, and we need independent control organizations. So this is actually a flow diagram of the quality assurance system that we developed. And you can see there are different actors. You have the experts, you have the demolition waste management organization Tracimat, you have the contractors, and you have the crushers. So this was specifically developed for the stony fraction, but actually it can be used, and it is already being used for other materials also. So each actor has his own responsibility and has his own role to play. We distinguish two phases. We have first prior to the demolition. We start with the preparation of a pre-demolition audit. So an expert that is trained by us, he will make this pre-demolition inventory, which lists all the materials and its quantity that we can find in buildings and infrastructure. The information is entered into our database, so we developed a specific software for that. And Tracimat issues attestations of conformity for these pre-demolition audits and inventories. So they have to comply with specific standard procedures. And then we have the demolition itself. When the demolition starts, we get a notification of the demolition worker. He tells us when he's going to start his works. And there is a follow-up of the removal of the hazardous waste. So after all the hazardous waste has been removed, we have an inspection of one of the experts that we trained. Now, in the near future, I think beginning next year, there is something new coming into our legislation, and that is that the demolition contractor will have to prepare a demolition plan prior to the demolition. And this demolition plan will contain information on selective demolition. So there will be some materials where we have a legal obligation to separate them at the source. So in this demolition plan, the demolition contractor will tell how he's going to do this selective demolition, the techniques he's going to use, and also he will give information on the organization of the demolition waste on the site. So then we have the inspection visit performed by an expert. He's looking at the removal of the hazardous waste, but in the future he will also look at the organization of all the other waste on the site, and he will also verify whether those materials that need to be separated at the source are actually being separated. Then, as I said, the system was initially developed to improve the quality of the recycled aggregates. So there's a link with the rules at the crusher. So if the system is being followed, then Tracimat can issue specific admission permits to LMRP. And LMRP, that's actually the stony fraction. It means that the stony fraction can be considered as material with a low environmental risk, laag milieurisicoprofiel, so low environmental risk profile. It says something about the material that's coming out of the building, that it's been verified, and then it can be processed in a safe way. It doesn't contain any hazardous waste or disturbing substances. So when you have this admission from Tracimat, then the acceptance at the crusher is easier. So the acceptance criteria are less stringent, and the processing of the material can be done cheaper. So there is an economical incentive behind it, because it will cost them less to process the stony fraction. In the end, we trace all the materials coming from the demolition, and we issue certificates for selective demolition. So this certificate of selective demolition, it's now mandatory for some demolition works, not for all of them. For the bigger sites, it's mandatory to have a certificate of selective demolition. And this certificate tells the client that the demolition is being performed in compliance with the environmental laws, and also it tells the processor of the material that the demolition waste can be accepted as material with low environmental risk profile. It means that the waste comes from a selective demolition based on a destructive pre-demolition inventory, which has been verified for its quality by Tracimat. It also means that there's been a following up of the correct removal of hazardous wastes and of the separate collection of substances that can hamper recycling. And it also followed this traceability system. So we developed it for the stony fraction, but our mission today is to do it for all the materials. And now the mission of Tracimat is actually to extract as many materials as possible purely from demolition and renovation so that they can be recycled as much as possible and to have high quality of the recycled material. And how are we doing that? So we have our legal tasks, which I just explained is a traceability procedure. But we also participate in research projects where we want to work on solutions. So we by following up all these, we daily follow up a lot of demolition sites, so we can identify where the needs are, where specific barriers are to have good recycling. So we try to find solutions for these needs and barriers in research projects. Then we have our database, which contains a lot of information, which can be very interesting, not only for our public agencies, but also for producers of construction material who want to recycle material. And then the fourth thing that is very important with us is the trainings we provide for experts, for demolition workers. We want to, all the knowledge that we gather and everything we learn, we want to share again with all our stakeholders. So we do all this as a non-profit organization out from a neutral and a central role in the demolition process. We bring together stakeholders because that's very important. If we want to enhance recycling, we have to bring the whole chain together. So we identify barriers and needs. We want to enhance the transition towards circular economy in construction, and we also work hard on policy recommendations. So I just quickly go over those 4 important things that we do. So we have our legal tasks, which I explained already. On this slide shows you where it's mandatory. So all demolition works of non-residential buildings with a building volume larger than 1,000 cubic meters, and residential buildings with a building volume bigger than 5,000 cubic meters, they have to follow our system. So they need this certificate of selective demolition at the end of the demolition. And it also is the case for infrastructure works where there is more than 250 cubic meters of material that's being set free, that's released. The pre-demolition audit report is linked to the permit application. So when you apply for a demolition permit, you have to add the pre-demolition audit report. Yeah, these are some figures. Actually, it's from September, but yesterday we celebrated the 10,000th attestation that we issued. So we followed till now. In the last 5 years, we followed up 10,000 demolition sites. The project, so as I said, we participate in projects to find solutions for the barriers that we see during our follow-up of the day-to-day projects. So we have international, interregional, national, and regional projects, and I just listed some of them here. I'll go over it quickly. We have data-driven demolition, that actually we have this database which contains a lot of information on materials that are present in our buildings. We also have information on when they will be set free, when they will be demolished. So we try to examine in this project how can this database help us to enhance recycling, to facilitate recycling, to facilitate waste collection. How can we work on logistics? So that's we are focusing on the data in our database and how it can help us to enhance recycling. We have circular demolition teams, and in this project we are trying to develop new cooperation formulas, because we see when the demolition contractors gets his order to demolish a building, the client expects that the next day the building is demolished, and it doesn't give the opportunity to the demolisher to think about possible materials that can be reused or recycled. And actually the architect, they are focusing on building a new building, but they don't look at the old building that's there. And we are trying to find new formulas that they sit together, the architect, the contractor, the expert, that they all sit together before the new building is being designed and before the old building is being demolished. So to optimize actually recycling, again, always with the same goal. Then we have ICEberg, which is a big international Horizon 2020 project. Maybe you know about this, but you can ask, if you have questions about this, you can ask this later, maybe Mohammed already told you about it. Then we look into standard specifications for demolition, because we see there's often a lot of discussion between the client and the demolition contractor on the costs. So by having a good tender and good specification, we can give an answer to a lot of the discussions. Another one, like Visum, which this is a project on the non-stony fraction material coming from demolition. And there we are bringing together acceptance criteria for processors, and we just want to share information to the experts and to the demolition workers, because often they don't know about specific recycling facilities or that are already existing. So for different materials, we are making materials sheets and recycling sheets that include, for example, the acceptance criteria of the facility who can recycle it. So this is information that we are going to spread on a platform. We are developing a computer platform which will be free to use for everybody. And then we have training and knowledge sharing. We have mandatory training programs for our demolition experts. So if you want to work with us, if you want to make a pre-demolition audit for Tracimat, then you have to follow a training. And this training contains a lot of specific fields, like we talk about, of course, legislation and standard procedures. We have an important part is about asbestos, the recognition of asbestos, where we can expect to find asbestos in buildings, risk assessment, handling and removal of asbestos, but also about other hazardous materials in buildings. We give lectures about material with high recycling potential, how to measure a building and how to quantify all these materials, what is important in historical research and field research, how is selective demolition being performed, and how do you perform as an expert, how can you perform a good control visit on site. We also have specific trainings for schools, for clients, for demolition companies. We have learning networks for demolition contractors, where we bring together some contractors in small groups, and we discuss about the problems and how to deal with the problems, and where the different demolition contractors try to learn from each other. We also have trainings about on reuse, from doing a quick scan to in-depth inventory. In November, we will do our first training on radioactive materials. We work together with specific research centers on nuclear material. So this is a new training. And yes, well, trainings on specific on recycling of specific materials. We work together with a lot of producers of materials who are looking for their material to recycle, and they come and explain to us what they are looking for and what their needs are. So we have the trainings, we have knowledge sharing, and we have policy recommendation. We try to give feedback on a regular basis through our newsletters on what we are working on and on specific results of research projects. We have working groups with the different stakeholders in the world of demolition. We also are in a way between the regulators, our government, and those who make legislation, and between the field. And we try to translate the ambitions from one side to the other, and also try to be, if we say, if our those who make the legislation, our public waste agency, wants to install new legislation, and if they want to see how feasible it is, then they come to us to have a neutral answer on this. So I think this is a very much an added value of Tracimat, because we are in close contact with the field, with the practical, what we are doing in the field. And on the other hand, we can bring this together with the ambition of our government, who wants to go towards 100% circular economy. Okay, and that's actually a short introduction to what we are doing. Thank you very much, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Liesbet, for this really interesting and informative webinar on the work of Tracimat. And now we would welcome any question. Either you can raise your digital hands, please, or you can type your questions in the chat, please. So we have got the first question from Howard, please. Thank you.
I like to start things off, Mohammed, as you know. Are you looking at embedded carbon at all in your work? It seems to be, it's sort of flavour of the month in UK. And I wondered if you're covering that at all within your field.
No, and in what specific way do you?
The demolition industry in the UK has had some very bad press recently, that we're demolishing buildings without any care for the environment. But obviously it's the client who's deciding whether a building's being demolished, and we're being blamed for the release of the embedded carbon within that structure. So the UK drive seems to be more heading towards reuse rather than recycle, to ensure that the embedded carbon is not released, it's captured in the material and reused in the material.
So we look to reuse, and in fact, Tracimat, firstly, when we were founded, we were looking at the recycling of the recycled aggregates, and it was for demolition, not to keep the structure, but for demolition. Now, reuse was not embedded in our system, actually. Now, that's what we've been changing, because reuse it comes before recycling, actually, and we are working on reuse also. So we now are doing the quick scans, but we do see a lot of, I mean, reuse will always be, it's very difficult, because we have a lot of, we have the technical problems, we have a problem of storage. So what we do now is we look at the material that have a high potential for reuse. Often we see, if we have the reuse inventories, that in the end nothing is being reused because it's just costs a lot of money, and we're trying to look for solutions for that. But if you talk about embedded carbon, it's more like how you put it into the tendering, actually.
Okay, I agree with your comments there. It is expensive and more difficult, but it seems to be flavour of the month, certainly here in the UK at the moment. So
it gets a lot of attention in Flanders too, but it will always, I mean, and we can definitely work on that, and we can definitely raise the materials that are being reused, but in the end, reuse has its limits too.
Absolutely agree.
I think it has always been tricky, because if the building hasn't been designed for reuse, it hasn't been designed for the construction. So it is sort of half-baked recipe trying to recycle. And then, like Howard said, Liesbet, in the UK, the issue of embedded carbon, circularity, and the waste hierarchy in terms of priority reuse before recycling is a top, especially embedded carbon. So I'm aware of the time. I think I'll move on into the next question by Stan, please. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So my question was also about reuse. So maybe you can elaborate. So and I'm interested in two aspects of reuse. One is whether you're able to sort of track or like make meaningful distinctions between what the EU calls preparing for reuse and sort of wider reuse, where you would, for example, keep part of the structure there to be reused, which I think is not preparing for reuse, but clearly a valuable form of reuse, but then it falls under different terminology, and so it's not really part of sort of waste accounting. So I'm just wondering if you can comment on that. And the second thing, whether you can tell us something about sort of on-site versus off-site reuse, how difficult it is, especially not so much practicalities, but sort of in terms of measurement and tracking of what's going on.
Okay, so as I said, our system was developed for recycling and not for reuse. So what we want to do is the material that comes out, that it's free of hazardous waste and no disturbing materials for recycling. Now we are starting to look into reuse, but the thing is, our standard procedures, which are written in our environmental laws, they are actually also focusing on the material and not on the element. So if our database contains information on how much wood we have in the building, how much concrete, bricks, plastics, or different kind of plastics on the quantity, but not on it doesn't say we have so many doors that can be reused. So this is actually not in our system. Because we have a lot of attention also in Flanders on reuse, we do realize we have to work on that. And we are now adapting our database to introduce also specific elements in it. But what we see that when we make reuse plans, some experts put a lot of effort into it, and in the end, nothing is being reused. And there are different reasons for that, and I mean, it's something we really have to work on, because I'm sure we can improve it. But the problem, one of the problems is the way the tendering goes today. So the client doesn't look at reuse yet. And the architect who's going to demolish the building, he doesn't think about the building as going to be demolished. He's thinking about the new building he's going to build, and he doesn't look into the old building. And that's where we are working on, is on this new way of tendering and having this demolition team right at the beginning of the project, and to look there on the reuse elements. We also feel we have some contractors and architects or initiatives of people who try to collect specific material for reuse. But the problem we have is, or the problem that they have, is they store it, and it stays in their storage place, and nobody buys it. And so the thing that happens now is those companies, they don't go and get any reuse elements out of the buildings anymore, unless they are already sold, unless they already know where they will use them again. So reuse doesn't really work well yet in Flanders, but there are things that we can do to improve it. It will stay limited, but I mean, I'm convinced that we have to work on it. But it's also, yeah, it's we have a lot of questions about how do we put this in a tender? What with the responsibilities? What if the material doesn't perform as we expected that it should be? Who is responsible for what?
Yeah.
Architects have a big responsibility in our legislation, and they are like, oh no, we're not going to do that because I don't want to take this responsibility. So who is going to take the responsibility? So there are a lot of things that need to be solved before we can have more reuse.
Yeah, I think
much.
the reuse issue is a very debatable aspect. It's quite a timely issue. Lots of going on. I think it's just based on the question from Stan's looking at the material reuse and the asset reuse. And I know that laws has started somewhere. I think in Europe, they are already thinking about it. It started in some of the European countries now, where before you demolish, you have to come up with an application to say why you can't reuse the asset. So if it's not a convincing evidence, they're not going to allow you to demolish. So there's a lot going on, and it's just a matter of time where I think, again, is going to the source. If the building has been designed for the construction, for reusability, for adaptability, then it could be done something. But at the same time as well, for, like we said, for the reuse of products, there are a lot of challenges, which is, like we said, the cultural aspect. People are reluctant to specify materials, the market as well, with the standard of secondary materials. And I'm sure Howard could talk hours about this in their business as the Federation of Demolition Contractors. So the next question from Feya. Good to see you, Feya. Feya, can you hear us? We can't hear you. You're muted.
Hi. Hello.
Perfect.
Yes. Thank you very much, Liesbet. That was super interesting. I'm sure that we could talk about this for several hours, if not days. And something I was interested in, I mean, the fact, so within Flanders that you've introduced that there's actually a mandatory obligation to undertake the audit prior to demolition. And I was wondering, I mean, there's all sorts of questions, but I was wondering, even though it's just been brought in, has that changed the demolition sector and construction sector culture towards how they look at demolition and building?
Mm-hmm.
Because it looks like you're on a bit of a trajectory, and I just wondered if you're playing quite an important role in changing the culture and how important that regulation has been.
Mhm.
Just Liesbet, before you answer that question, just Feya is part of the center. She was part. She's now an academic member of another university, and she's a policy expert. She was looking part of our center's project, looking at policy for circular economy. Just for your information, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So what did it change? Well, I think we have, so now it has become mandatory, and so to work with us, and we follow up those demolition sites that work with us, but the rest of the enforcement is lacking a little bit. So one of the problems we face is that the contractors say, if we don't follow your system, what consequence is there? Not too much.
So it's only for your system that it's mandatory.
Excuse
It's
me?
it's only for your system it's mandatory.
Yes.
Right. Okay. It's not across the sector as a whole.
No, it's for the sector and for the demolition of the big buildings, the larger buildings. They have to follow our system. And the first step is the pre-demolition audit, and that's easy because if they don't have a pre-demolition audit, then they don't get their permit. So that's easy to enforce. But then the next steps is that they have to work with us. They need all these attestations, attestations. And then that's more difficult to enforce. But you do see, I mean, you have the clients who ask for their certificate, and you do see more and more demolition workers that work with us. And they, I mean, if they don't work well, we try not to be that too repressive, but to help them in doing better. And we do see that things are changing there. Beside that, I mean, in the beginning of next year, there will be this mandatory demolition plan, and we have some specific materials that will be mandatory to separate at source. This will have a major impact on our on the demolition, because, for example, glass. I mean, glass. It's coming into the recycled aggregates now, and it will be mandatory to keep it apart, which has a huge impact on the cost of the demolition. So the Public Waste Agency looks at us to see if they do it well. So the regulation is becoming more and more stringent, and I mean, I think there are a lot of things happening that we don't know yet, but I used to work for the on the excavated soil legislation, and we saw it's going. I mean, every year we had new contractors who try to comply with the legislation, and it just takes some time. But yeah, you do see in the end. The legislation on excavated soil now exists 20 years, and I mean it made a huge evolution in the beginning that nobody did it, and now everybody follows it, and it's created a new market, and everybody's happy now. But in the beginning, of course, it's a big change, and it's not so easy. So we have to, I mean, as our organization, we have to do a lot of, give a lot of information and try to convince everybody on why we do this. And it's also, now you feel more and more support of the material, the producers of construction material. They are really looking for their specific material because they know they are going to have to, I mean, from Europe, there will come new rules, and they're looking into recycling their materials. They didn't do that 5 years ago, and they want to work together with the demolition sector to see how can we get we want that material. How can you bring it with us? And if they start paying for it, I mean, it really depends on what material we're talking about, because every material is so different. But there's a lot of things I feel there's a big transition going on now. And you need different incentives, not only legislation, but you feel if they want to pay for, or if it's cheaper to get rid of your material if you work with us, then I mean it starts working. So
yeah. It's just interesting because of the sort of attitude towards regulation within England is slightly different, I think. And seeing it, how positive it can be in helping create the markets is, you know, over a period of time, and capacity and skills and knowledge.
of course, I am talking those. It's the system. It's not mandatory for the smaller buildings, and a lot of the demolition is in the smaller buildings. So it's, of course, it's the bigger buildings that, and I mean, there you often have less cowboys probably too.
Right. I think it's such an interesting debate and a timely topic, but sadly the time is up. We are already, I think, 3 minutes overrun. I think I'm really sorry for the colleagues about all the questions and the comments on the chat. We didn't have time to go through them. I think there are some interesting comments and additions and questions. For example, talking about, remember we are talking about the adaptation versus a new build, reusing. I think Kay has mentioned that Greater London Authority has already, it's a requirement to have pre-demolition audits to show that the building could be reused and so forth. There are a lot of questions and answers. Hopefully we can have maybe a follow-up on this in the next few months, maybe another seminar to follow up on maybe reuse for materials versus reuse of assets. That would be really an interesting thing. But meanwhile, I really would like to thank you all for attending this webinar, and please keep an eye on the agenda of the next webinars in the next few months. And then I really would like to thank very much indeed Liesbet for her time and the insights on what Tracimat are doing, and policy insights into EU and Flanders and Belgium in particular. We're very much grateful for your time and information about the topic. Thank you very much indeed, Liesbet. And I'll see you next week for the iceberg project. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much all, and have a lovely afternoon or evening wherever you are. Thank you very much.